Okay, and welcome to the teacher's room. Tonight we have people from Japan and originally from the United States and England and Canada, as well as a new guest from Nepal, a new guest from Indonesia as well. So that's really, really nice. Tonight we're very, very happy to have a chance to introduce Andy Boon to some of you and to have a chance to spend an hour, the rest of this hour, to talk together and get to know all about Andy and his teaching. So Andy, why don't you start off with just a little, the first question normally is just how you got from high school student to teacher in Tokyo and how that journey has happened in as much or as little detail as you would like.
Okay, it's an interesting story because I went to high school in Bolton, in England, in the northwest. It's near Manchester, and I absolutely hated school. I hated my high school very passionately, and I left at the age of 16 because I had no place at school or in education. So I took a job, and I worked for an insurance company for 4 years. So I was doing office work, and I had day release study, but it really wasn't for me. And luckily, I think I was about 20 years old. I did it for 4 years, and everyone in my department was 10 years older than me, and they were all still doing the same kind of job. And they started to pass me all of this great literature, like Jack Kerouac, On the Road. And I decided I would quit my job and go traveling. And that's what I did. And then it was one day I was watching the movie Dead Poets Society. And it inspired me so much. I realized what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach. So I traveled.
Just from the movie?
Just from the movie.
Wow.
That's when I decided to quit my job and go traveling, to suck out the marrow of life, which is the poem in the movie. And I went traveling for a few years. I came back and I studied to go to university. I did a 3-year degree course, and then I did a teacher training course in England. And during the course, we were all looking for jobs. And that's when I saw an advert in the paper to go and teach in Japan. So I applied for the job. I was also a bartender for 7 years. Hello.
Hello.
I was also a bartender for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I had this crossroads. I was offered fast track management for pubs in England, or do a PGC, which is a British qualification for teaching. So I did my teacher training, and then I came to Japan in 1997, and I'm still here now. So I wasn't sure whether teaching would be for me, but I got into it. I really enjoyed it. And then I started my master's. I went from conversation school through business English teaching. I was working at a cram school, doing lots of part-time positions, and then I slowly got into university teaching, and carried on studying.
So how long ago did you finish your PhD, your doctorate degree?
I started in 2009 and I finished in 2015.
Wow, almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Wow.
I got the official pass in October 2015, and I had my graduation ceremony 2016. So yeah, time has gone by so quickly since then.
What did you think about coming to Japan originally? Was that the only ad that you found?
Yeah, it was the only ad. Actually, I went for 2 positions with 2 conversation schools, which remain nameless.
Yeah.
And one I got the job and one I didn't, which was kind of ironic. So yeah, I think once I was offered the position, I decided I would come. It was part of my dream to travel the world. And I originally intended to come just for 2 years, and then I got stuck. So
So how long were you teaching before you realized? For me, I was teaching about 6 years in Japan, and I can still remember the day that I was going down to get on my motorcycle to drive to work, and it was a sunny day, and I was feeling very happy that I liked my job, I liked my students, I was just in a very up mood. And I remember yelling up to my wife, who was in the window, just saying, I think I'm going to be a teacher. I like this. But it was 6 years of just
right,
working, you know. But how about you? What's your that
that's a that's
doing
a
it? Yeah.
yeah, that's a great question. So I need to go back to my teacher training. So before I went to university, I studied English literature at Bolton College with a fantastic teacher called Mike Comer, who was an absolute inspiration to me. Compared to my high school teacher, this guy was absolutely amazing.
How?
Um, just the way he taught, he was very passionate about literature. His lessons were very interesting. He gave the students voice. He listened. I was intrigued. He knew his stuff. There were many things about him. So I went away for 3 years and did my English literature degree. And on my teacher training, I had the placement at Bolton College, and I took Mike Comer's classes as part of my teacher training.
Uh,
And this is a true story. Before my teacher training, I went to observe the class, but Mike was sick that day, and they had a substitute teacher. So I'm sat in the class with the students who are all mature students and a substitute teacher. And the substitute teacher went on a break because it's a 3-hour class, and all of the students criticized very badly the substitute teacher. So I was petrified, but I thought, well, this is my moment. So I stood up in front of everybody and said, you don't know me. You might think I'm a new student in this class, but from next week, I'll be teaching you. Don't wait until I go out of the room to do what you've just done, because I'm trying to figure out if teaching is my career. If you think I'm that bad, tell me to my face, please. You'll do me a really big favor for my life. They would listen. They went, okay. And then I taught them D.H. Lawrence, Women in Love.
mhm.
And I had a great time with the students. And
How many students roughly?
probably about 12.
Yeah.
It was called an access class for mature students to get into university. And there was the oldest woman in the class was the most negative towards the substitute teacher. She wrote me the most inspirational postcard at the end of my teacher training saying, you made D.H. Lawrence come alive for me. You've really got what it takes to be a teacher. I really enjoyed your class. That was the moment. That postcard, that feedback, I was like, this is for me.
That's the validation, isn't it?
It is. And you come out of the classroom when you've done a good class and you have what I call the buzz, where you're buzzing because the class went really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get that very often with that class. I went in and I said, look, I've only just read Women in Love. I'm going to be one step ahead of you. It's going to be a learning process for us all. I've never taught a novel before. I've never taught literature before. It was a great adventure. But I had the Robin Williams, the Poet Society in my mind, and it was just a great experience. And that feedback was everything for me.
Okay,
And
here's a tough question. If you were only 1 week ahead of the students and you
yes.
were figuring out what to teach and what was the content, what did you use to compensate for what you were obviously lacking in knowledge and
Well,
teaching
I've always,
experience?
I still use this now
I know.
today.
I'm going where that is. You're going to tell us now.
I always liken my lesson planning or my curriculum design. I'm building a rail track, a train track, and the train is coming. As long as I can keep laying the tracks before the train comes, the train won't derail. And I've done that all of my life. so I'm busy. Obviously, I'm a little more experienced and have more tracks down there, but as long as the train doesn't derail. So when I was a student teacher, that train was coming much quicker, and I just had to. And actually, one of the best advice I got was the most awful advice from one of the teachers at Bolton College. I can't remember her name. And I said, "How do I teach a novel?" And she said, "Just do it," as though she was sponsored by Nike. But it was the best advice for me because I was like, okay, I'll approach it my way. And what I did was systematic. I went through it chapter by chapter, teased out the characters, the themes, class discussion. Yeah, it was a great experience. And so then when I came to Japan, you know, ironically, I started off in conversation school, which seems to be academically on the lower pecking order of things for the teachers. I mean, it's an entry level position. However, the students I had were probably the most motivated because they pay a lot of money to study. And the experiences I had in that classroom and the conversation school I worked at threw you in at the deep end because like you prepared an introductory class, and then when that ran out after 2 days, you have to prep everything. And I had a full-on schedule, so it was really hardcore learning. But
yeah, it's very much sink or swim, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with, my first class was a kids class, and I said I never wanted to teach children. My first class, oh hi, and they're like, we hi.
Yeah.
And then and then suddenly I had an adults class, and it was an amazing experience, and the people I met, and Japanese students are incredibly kind to new teachers. These students were wonderful because they really wanted me to succeed, and they, if my lessons weren't always brilliant or weren't always 10 out of 10, then they cut me the slack I needed to grow and develop. And also part of the job was to give them feedback on their progress, but they also gave me feedback too. And I had some wonderful comments there, like, I've been with you for 2 years and I've really seen you develop and get better and better. Yeah, so it's that kind of, I sometimes miss that feedback because I sometimes get it from university students, but it's more like, I love you, which isn't really so productive. Whereas, it'd be, with the business classes, it would be like, oh, I really enjoyed this, but when you write on the board, could you write more clearly? Oh, that's a really important feedback for me because then I can do something about you.
Mm-hmm.
Strange messages from Indonesia. Oh, it's a private message. That's all right then.
There you go.
Okay.
One comment you just reminded me of was I was about 2 weeks into my job at the university, and somebody said, this was after 20 years in the high school, and people were saying, you know how to teach, don't you? And so I didn't quite understand, but then soon I understood that there are a number of professors at the university who are expert in something but don't know anything about teaching.
I've had the same, I hear you. The same feedback is your lessons are organized, which is actually wonderful feedback. I can see where your lessons are going. I can see the structure, and this is the feedback I get from my university students, which worries me. Like, so some of your classes aren't organized.
Or they don't know. They don't know how to connect with the students or how to hit them at a level that's not too far above their head, but still challenging.
If I go back to my PGCE, which is for those not British, it's a postgraduate certificate in education, which people do after a degree to become a teacher. When I was doing that course, I was sat in a room, and it was really funny because they asked you what qualifications you had. So it started with me because I happened to be at the front, and it went round this square table. Hi, I'm Andy. I've just finished my degree. Degree, master's, PhD, PhD plus postdoctoral in mathematics. It seemed to be that we're all sat in academic level, and
Yeah.
it just went up. So I began to get worried. Then the next question was, why are you on the PGC? To get a job, to get a job, to get a job. And there was a movement 20 odd years ago in England where professors at universities were being asked to do PGCEs because they were specialists in their subjects but didn't know how to teach.
Yeah.
So you can be an expert in the field of sociolinguistics, but maybe you can't teach it.
Right.
So go do a PGCE because we need you to teach.
That's something I always say to the teachers if I'm doing teacher trainings, and you're on the front lines right now, and you're learning your craft, you're learning the art of teaching.
Yes.
And that that everything you're doing now is helping you, because you don't know where you're going to be in the future someday. So make the most of.
Yeah. So it's and the wonderful thing, as we know about teaching, is we're always learning. So every class is another opportunity to learn something.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move over into, we added this question at this point to try to think about new teachers. We've got some new teachers who have been watching these videos. I just did a training with 50 JET teachers who just arrived a week ago. And I gave them these links and told them about you and a couple of others who would be coming in. So which of the 4 skills, if I have to give you a class tomorrow and you're going to teach reading, writing, listening, or speaking, and you can choose any one of them, which one would you pick?
I would probably pick speaking.
Okay. Now, for the benefit of these teachers, give us a context or a level of students and talk me through 1 or 2 activities that are your kind of go-to activities that will work.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say this because I've just been doing teacher training in Indonesia. And the idea that some of the activities that I introduced to teachers, they were very interested in, and I got them to actually do the activities.
Good.
And most of my activities involve movement, because I think the more traditional way of teaching, and we go back to Dead Poet Society, the guy goes into the room, goes to the front, maybe the teacher's area is elevated to put power over the students. Open your books, and I'm going to stay at the front and dictate what you do from the front. Whereas Robin Williams goes in, goes to the front, walks to the back and say, come on, follow me. I've done that kind of thing in my classes, always doing the unexpected, so the students don't know where I'm going to stand, where I'm going to be, and what space I'm going to occupy. And I'm going to occupy their space as well as my space, and they're going to occupy my space too. So something, for example, if you're doing any kind of speaking activity, starting with vocabulary. So say you're doing something like, I want to talk about deciding a restaurant to eat in.
Okay.
Before we go there, let's think about different kinds of food. We have our friend from Nepal, James. So we might have a Nepalese restaurant. Well, what does a Nepalese restaurant sell? Well, it sells great curry, maybe it's spicy, maybe you can get some papadums, or maybe you can get some samosa. And so what I want to do is find out what the students know. So put them into groups, get them to shout out maybe 5 types of restaurants. So you've got Italian, do a circle on the chalkboard, Korean, Nepalese, Japanese, Chinese. Okay, what can you order in these restaurants? Give them all a piece of chalk. Each student has to run up, I call this chalkboard relay. The chalk is the relay marker. Run up, write one idea and pass to your teammate. Run up and write one idea, pass to your teammate. It's a race game, but it generates so much vocabulary. Students don't have time to worry about spelling mistakes. It's okay because I can error correct after the event.
Output.
And yeah. It's community language learning, because the language then comes from the students, and they have a chance to see what they all know. and you can build from there, and that's a very important movement game. In Indonesia and China and all of the places that I've done, I've always introduced an activity called kaiten zushi, which I had the
explain kaiten
I
zushi.
will explain kaiten zushi. I had the pleasure to get it in Jeremy Harmer's book as well, which was great. I line students up, and kaiten zushi is basically revolving sushi bar. Each student has a partner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you have a row of 10 students, a row of 10 students. You've got 20 students. You give them a question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite food? I like curry. That's all you need to do. And then switch. They move one space. So student 2 goes to student 1. Student 1 goes to student 2. Everyone rotates one space. Repeat again, repeat again, repeat again. And you get that kind of movement. And I've done this with 40 students. It's a lot of fun. Students aren't sat facing forward. They're facing each other. You create an important interactional space. It avoids cliques because you don't know who your partner's going to be. Students aren't aware of how much English they're speaking because, it's such a quick activity. And then you can feed in more questions. You can error correct at the front. So I've been doing this for years to great success. And I presented on it a lot and heard teachers come back to me and say, oh, I tried your activity and it really worked.
And so how much are you usually doing? About 90-minute lessons?
I'm doing 90-minute lessons, but I have done 50-minute lessons.
So say you're doing that, and I've done that. It's a great activity for maybe 15 minutes. How do you go longer? Or?
It depends on what the target of the lesson is.
Sure.
If my target of the lesson is fluency, and I want students, so for example, my go back lesson will be talk about summer vacation.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is encourage students to use follow-up questions, because I don't know about students around the world, but Japanese students will tend to not ask follow-up questions. What did you do in your summer vacation? I went to Osaka. Okay. And that's the end of the conversation. Yeah. So what I then want to do within that interactional space is get them to then say, well, what did you do in Osaka? Who did you go with? How long did you stay? Did you buy any souvenirs? What would what was the weather like? I want them to go beyond just asking one question. So then that activity could then expand into a 30-minute, 40-minute activity.
And what do you think from your experience with Japanese students? What's stopping them from naturally asking all those follow-up questions?
I think it's probably a junior high school and a high school education, and correct me if this is wrong, which is focused heavily on accuracy. And so then the fluency suffers. So and also grammar translation, on dictation and things like that, where students aren't used to having the freedom to speak or to expand on the conversation. And they're worried about making mistakes.
And so by keeping the pacing going and by showing your expectations,
yeah,
you can kind of get them into doing that kind of stuff without them even really thinking deeply about it.
And you can also, I do a lot of stand-up games where you can visually see how people are interacting, and students don't even ask questions in the L1. Yeah, so it's introducing them to the questions. You could have a stand-up game where the winning pair is the ones that keep the conversation going the longest. And so if you just go, what did you do in your summer vacation, Steve? I went to Canada. Oh, sit down. You've lost the game. So you've got to keep it going. And then introducing questions that they can't ask. Students also love to answer with just yes or no. Yeah. So it's also, it's kind of giving them examples. So in that kaiten zushi environment, what I tend to do after one round, I go stop, and then I'll give some feedback. So for example, if the pair that I've been listening to have done a really good thing, I'll say, this was really good because and give an example. Or I might do a correction, but not point to the students at the front. Try and speak more, try and ask more questions. Let's go. And trying to encourage the students to expand.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of endless, isn't it? I mean, that once you, and I mean, I spent all of April with one. I had a writing class, and I said, April's all about getting to know each other, folks. So I had 29 in the class, and they literally did your kaiten zushi. Yeah, I call it the snake because it starts in the back corner, and they're sitting two together, but one of them has to move in this direction. And I spent the whole 90 minutes. So they had whatever it was, 14 times 5. They had 14 different partners at 5 minutes.
Has stopped there, or
sorry?
I've stopped.
Yeah, you've
stopped.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just saying that I had them going a full 90 minutes of getting to know each other and doing these 5-minute shifts.
Right, that's exactly it, yeah.
Yeah, for the first 4 weeks, I did that. Next week, come in and tell us a famous story from your childhood. Everybody has a story that if you don't know, go ask your mother or your grandmother. So
I did that with my students. I've got a slightly higher level first year class this time. So I was like, okay, you're going to research on the internet. We were doing like mythical stories or too good to be true stories or something. Find the story on the internet, read it, take notes on it, and then you're going to retell the story to everybody in the class. So you've got all of these students on their smartphones looking at these stories on the internet, telling me which story so there's no overlap, and then going and sharing. I mean, it's just great when that happens because they're teaching each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing what you can do really well is observe the whole thing, pick up some global errors, pick up some encouraging words, praise some students who are taking chances. It's all win-win, right?
And to avoid the overlap, you can have them work in pairs, so they're working together. Once they found the story, they come and tell you. You write it on the board and say, no one do the story. Now, those pairs are then going to split, and they're going to say, have you spoken to my partner? No, I haven't. Or have you heard the story of this? No, I haven't. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you. Or have you heard the story? Well, yeah, I've already spoken to your partner. Okay, I'm going to move to somebody else. So all of that kind of sharing. And going back to kaiten zushi, I also do a table activity. So you put the tables into 4. And you have 2 stayers and 2 movers. They interact. Someone's mentioned active listening in the box. They listen to their partner and take notes. Then the 2 movers will move to the next table. So say you've got 24 students. Group 1 will move to group 2. Group 2 will move to group 3. Everyone moves around. They start again. Move around. Eventually, they'll get back home. They've taken notes and interviewed different people. They can then share in the group everything. So what I'll be doing in September will be a summer vacation activity. What did you do with your summer vacation? There'll be an online stopwatch counting down 5 minutes. They got 5 minutes to find out about each other's summer vacation. Then they move to the next partner and move. And then they come back and share. I spoke to Toru. He went to Disneyland with his girlfriend. He saw the Mickey Mouse parade. He had a great time. I spoke, and they can share everything. So it's speaking and listening combined. And I'm writing, taking notes.
That leads into that most people are arguing that it's called a listening class, but you're going to be doing some speaking, you're going to be doing some reading and some writing, and how, to me, I'm convinced that's the best way to learn now, is to take one idea and do it in 4 different ways. Do it as a listening, as a speaking, as a reading, and a writing. And they don't even know that they're working on a lot of fluency as well as improving their accuracy, and you can throw in some complexity.
I mean, that's that. I mean, that you can't separate the 4 skills, but what you can do is focus on one skill more.
Yeah.
So in a writing class, before you write, go and find out information from everybody. That's speaking and listening.
Yep.
Do some research online. That's reading.
Yep.
Share what you found with your partner. That's speaking and listening again.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll look at writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to transition into the toughest part of the whole interview.
Oh no.
So the question is, I talked with Curtis Kelly about this one time, and it's talking about your theory of learning. You know, how do people learn? And he tried this. We were talking about it, and he said he went the next day to a session and asked everybody to take 5 minutes to write down how people learn and then kind of talk with each other about it. So I want to throw that at you. And obviously there's no right answer or wrong answer. It's sort of based on what you believe is what you then bring to the classroom as your quote unquote theory of practice or classroom practice. So just in broad strokes, or however you interpret it, how do you believe people learn a language?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
I'm going to say that there is no answer.
Right.
There are many answers, and everyone has a different way of learning and a different way that's memorable to them. I know how I learn a language, and I know how I don't. I have met people in this country who've learned through rote learning, memorization, and are able to do that. I think I like to use the word eclectic. I have an eclectic approach, and I try and do a variety of different things in the class. So I think people learn visually, they learn orally, they learn through memorization, they learn by personalization, they learn by reviewing, which is something that is important that we sometimes forget. So especially with vocabulary, you need to see the word in different contexts. And every time you come across that word, you will either modify your understanding of what the word is or confirm your understanding of the word. So it's exposure to the language. And I've often thought to myself, I can only provide the opportunity for language learning to take place in my classroom. That's all I can do. Students may then take that opportunity. And one of the comments is being language hungry.
Yeah.
If students are very motivated, it's going to be that much easier. I deal sometimes with very low motivated students who don't want to learn or don't see the necessity to learn. In some of my presentations, I talk about my experience of learning French as a young child in England. Why do I need French? And I don't need French, actually. But sorry to the French speakers. To try and then make it fun, so that even if you're a Japanese student who graduates, gets a job in Japan, and never ever comes across an English word again, and never speaks another English word in their life, they've learned something that they can use after, whether it be grouping people in a classroom, whether it be body language, whether it be presentation skills, something that is then transferable to what they need in life. I can only ever provide. I've moved away from your question, haven't I?
No.
But I can only provide opportunities for language learning to take place with the skills that I've got. There is no singular way of learning a language. You know, I can go on TV and try and sell a book. The best way to learn English is, but we know that it's.
Well, talk just a little bit about how what languages. You obviously had a painful experience with French. Have you been working on any other languages?
Salamapagi. No. I've struggled with Japanese.
Hmm.
My Japanese isn't great. However, funnily enough, yesterday, and I've been out of the country for 3 weeks. Yesterday, I teach a student on a Monday night, and I got in the elevator with a neighbor. And normally, people don't speak to me in elevators in Japan, but this woman decided to have a conversation about the weather,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to respond fluently and understand everything that she said. So I must have had some success in learning Japanese at some point. Um, so how have I learned it? I mean, I've sat down and done rote learning. And for something like katakana, which is the writing system, hiragana or kanji, the
Yeah.
writing system in Japan, I do think the best way is repetition.
Mm-hmm.
When I learned there's 50 katakana symbols, 50 hiragana symbols.
Yeah.
Every day I went to the whiteboard and I wrote a, I, u, a, o, kaki, ku, keiko, sashi, susu, and I wrote them all. And it was all rote learning, and that was the best way to do it. But if I only learned Japanese by rote learning, then it wouldn't work. So it's exposure to the language in different ways. And going back to being language hungry, sometimes there'll be something that you just really want to know. For example, I got my eyes tested about 4 weeks ago, and the doctor kept saying this one word. Now, of course, I've got a vested interest in knowing what this word is because my eyesight is getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
And she repeated this word over and over again. As soon as I came out of the optician or the eye doctor or what do you call them? Optometrist.
Ophthalmologist.
Then I contacted a friend who's got better Japanese than me and said, "What does this word mean?" It was my eyes are aging. I'm getting old.
Me too.
Like, okay, fair enough. but you know, so that experience, that real life experience, I've got to know this word because it might be really important. If we can try and get that into the classroom where students are interested, well, this word, I'm interested in knowing this, or I'm interested in knowing this. I think that's really important. I mean, Merle Swain talks about output hypothesis and noticing gaps in your language. And I'm a big fan of that. Because, I mean, for me, if I go to a restaurant in Japan and I can't order food, I'm going to starve. So I've got a vested interest in learning how to communicate so I can order, or how I need to do. You know, I remember one time in Japan, I was going to call Pizza Hut or something and order a pizza, and I'd learned how to say my address in Japanese and my telephone number and the kind of pizza that I wanted, and I was all set. And, you know, I picked up the phone and they said, just a moment, chotomate.
Yeah.
They heard my Japanese, and then they passed the phone to someone who could speak fluent English. I spent hours ready for this conversation. But that, you know, that kind of the need, you've got to create the need.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about things like, I've got a colleague who I respect a lot who thinks it's all about the struggle. And that sort of, he tries to really challenge students and make them struggle. It's a very Japanese way to do it. Versus another friend who's very much into, you know, mindset, the fixed mindset, the growth mindset. There's just so many different kinds of things people focus on. I say for myself, it's all about, I'm a very humanistic kind of teacher where I think I'm dealing with the whole person. So I'm trying to connect with them and get to know them beyond what the language point is. And if I can help them do something that's related to their club activity, that's going to pay dividends in them making an effort in my English class. So, you know, people have their different little things. What's one or two of yours?
I think that's a very good research paper about teacher types.
Uh-huh.
It was in a book called Voices in the Language Classroom by Bailey and Noonan. And it was one of the chapters and it looked at the researcher went into a school and looked at different teachers and tried to categorize their type, like the entertainer,
Yes.
the authoritarian, and I think that was very interesting for me to read.
Yeah.
I think I'm more entertainer.
Okay.
I sometimes feel I'm doing stand-up comedy,
Yeah.
which is great. I like it. I try and get the students to laugh, which is important, because if they're laughing, they're understanding, then they're with me.
Yep.
Um,
And
I
that
don't.
the affective filter. I mean, that's, you relax, you enjoy, you're open to learning. There's lots written about that.
I'm dealing with students who have been spat out of the high school system,
Yeah.
and already have very low self-efficacy.
Yeah.
So if I make it a struggle for them, it's going to be really tough. However, over the last 3 years, I've been teaching this new program where I need to get my students to IELTS 5.5 or 6 within a year, which is really tough, and a lot of the students don't make it. There, I teach a little bit differently by saying, these are the expectations you need to get IELTS 6. I am not going to reduce these expectations. Otherwise, when you do the IELTS exam, you will hate me, because the IELTS exam is this high and you are here.
Yep.
But don't panic. I don't want to make it sure. I'll say, you will, when I play this listening to you, you're going to panic. But don't panic, because by the end of the year, it'll get easier. So rather than making it a struggle, I say it will be a struggle, but try and don't worry about it too much, because my job is to get you there. And I don't want to push the students too much, because they won't like it. It's a fine balance.
It sure is. I mean, I have this thing where I'm willing to push the students as to the point that I know they'll succeed. I don't push them to do things that I don't think they can do.
Right.
That's kind of the balance. Let's see. Oh, here we go. We got more things happening here. Good. Where did I want to go next? Oh, yeah.
No, you go to sleep.
I started. Oh, there we go. I just wanted to ask you about some of your influences. You mentioned Meryl Swain.
Yeah.
Are you able to describe that output hypothesis in a sentence or two? And then go into anybody else that's sort of been a big influence, either famous or not famous, people that have influenced you.
Well, the output hypothesis by Meryl Swain is about if you have to output the language and you notice there are gaps in your language to be able to do this, you will seek to fill those gaps. Is a very basic explanation of it, which is true. I mean, so I go back to my explanation. I have to order food in a restaurant in Spanish.
Yep.
I know no Spanish, so I need to fill that gap. And I think, as Itch has put in the chat box, I ordered coffee in Jakarta the other day in Bahasa Indonesian. They speak English there, so I had no need to do it.
Yeah.
That's a very important thing. And I think a lot of people will focus on input, but output is maybe more important. Because by not being able to output, you realize the lack.
Mm-hmm.
Or what you lack.
Yep.
And then seek to fill the gaps. I think that's very, very important for me.
So that probably comes out in your teaching as well, then, is that because you're focused on that, then you would be always keeping an ear open to situations where you see students missing that gap, or you can focus them on those gaps and bring the whole group together. And
I was very influenced by community language learning.
Yeah.
Not in the pure sense where there is a bilingual teacher, because I can't do that because I'm not bilingual, unfortunately. But if you are bilingual, you could do this, where the students make a circle and the teacher is behind the circle, and the student will, I want to say this in the target language, and the teacher will give that, and then it feeds into the group.
Yeah.
My interpretation of community language learning for Japanese students, they're all false beginners. They all have some level of English.
Sure.
Let's start with that as
Yeah.
the foundation. And instead of me being the purveyor of all knowledge and sensei and standing at the front, let's find out what the students know. And then after, I'll fill in anything that needs to be, filled in.
Yeah.
So that's been very influential for me too, to try and take myself out of the picture. In fact, one of my most successful classes to date, I still remember this class, very, very low level business English class. I had this script for a meeting about a convenience store. And there was like 5 items on the agenda, and they had to go through and discuss their solutions to the problems for this convenience store company. And for 2 hours, I was sat in the corner. I didn't speak a word. And all I did was write down corrections that I wanted to bring at the end of the class. And after 2 hours, the class had been so successful that we couldn't finish the meeting. So I said, would you like to continue this next week? And they all went, yeah. And I was totally redundant.
Yeah. I remember teaching a writing class in high school, and how they were so full of questions, and they don't know this and they don't know that. And 3 months later, I gave them a topic, and they immediately moved their desks together because they knew the routine was to brainstorm, blah, blah, blah. And then they didn't look up for 25 minutes. And I finally started doing a boo-hoo-hoo, pretending I was crying. And they all looked up and I said, you don't need me anymore. And it was that same brilliant class where they were now autonomous.
But I mean, if we go, I mean, I've studied a lot about counseling because of my research interests.
Yeah.
If you look at the job of a counselor, their client will come to them over a period of time because they have some problem in their life. The job of the counselor is to make themselves redundant so that the client stops coming and can cope with life on their own.
Yeah.
Isn't that the teacher's role as well?
Our job is to make themselves redundant. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I hear you saying. You know, other people might disagree with that and think that their job is to be the military boot camp person or the hold their hand entirely. But I tend to agree a lot more with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So anybody else that's a big influence on your teaching or learning?
Well, I mean, obviously, in terms of teacher development, Julian Edge has been the biggest influence.
Tell everybody a little bit about Julian Edge. Who is he, and what's
Julian Edge was a professor at Aston University in the UK when I met him.
Yep.
He then worked at Macquarie, and he's now retired, but he worked at Manchester University, and he developed a framework for reflective practice called cooperative development. And I'll just put that in the chat box. And I started cooperative development quite skeptically. And this is very much like counseling, where you're going to come to somebody with a problem or a puzzle, something that's going on in your classroom, and you want to know why it's happening. And we go back to the work of Carl Rogers, who was a psychotherapist.
Yep.
A humanistic psychotherapist, who said we should just listen to our patient. And the idea then is that rather than give advice or suggestion, which we tend to do as teachers because we all want to help so badly, we try and refrain from that and just listen and reflect back what we are understanding that you're trying to say. And by someone actually listening to you and summarizing your thoughts as you are speaking, it's a very powerful way of discovering something And I've done it myself, and there's been moments where I've gone, what if I do this? I remember one session when I was talking about my messy board work, and I can't remember what happened, but it's something like, I suddenly had this idea, what if I put the instructions on cards?
Mm-hmm.
It just has this powerful resonance for discovery, I think.
Notice the wonderful comment by Svetlana.
Yeah.
You notice that I can read Russian very clearly. That says
I'm sorry, I couldn't pronounce her name. So
Svetlana's a regular, so now I know. But people look for empathy, not sympathy. Isn't that a wonderful? Yeah, very good, Svetlana.
And I think we do have this tendency, and it's doubly so with teachers, because I don't think it's malicious. I think it's we have this desperate desire to help. When I'm in Shinjuku Station, I see someone struggling with a suitcase, because I'm a teacher, I rush in, can I help you with your suitcase? But so I think we tend to go, well, what I would do, or in my classes I do, and I think that sometimes stops, because we all know our class. Each class is a different context. Each institution, we know our classes, we know our students, we know that environment. So for me to come in and say, well, why don't you do this, is quite presumptuous. So rather than do that, we listen and guide you to the answer. Phil's just saying, I recall doing IMCD with you, Andy, years back. Thank you. Excellent. So I mean, that's become my research passion. And
that was originally something that Julian Edge spearheaded.
Julian Edge did cooperative development, and I did an IM instant messenger version, so that we could do it from the comfort of our own homes, rather than going 45 minutes by train to speak to someone face to face.
Yeah.
And that became my PhD work as well.
Oh, wonderful. Hasn't this been quick?
Yeah. Wow, that's an hour already.
Yeah. It's the same way with last week with Deborah Grow. We got basically through question 1 officially. But
wow.
I just find them fascinating to hear stories and hear what you're thinking. And I feel like I'm learning more than anybody else because I'm here every week. But I just want to say thank you very much. And we'll have you back for part 2 at some point, because I have a sense we could go on for a couple more hours.
I think so. And apologies if I didn't answer any questions that were in the chat window. So.
Yeah, I kept taking my glasses off. I can't see for the life of me. So that's how
Japanese word for that. Rogan. I learned it.
Rogan. It is Rogan in Japanese. Rogan. Yeah.
Rogan. Aging eyes.
Aging eyes. So anyway, thank you very much, James. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
you have a very, very friendly, happy face. We hope you come back again. Svetlana, really good to have you here. Phil and Yitza, and our best friend ever, Anne. Thank you for joining us as well. And what I'm going to do is, I don't think we trashed anybody, Andy, but I think I'm going to send you a copy of the video, and then see if you're okay with it. Then I'd like to share it with everybody.
That's fine. I don't think I trust anybody.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything. We didn't go anywhere. Yeah, not at all. Okay, so I'll send you a copy of it, and then we'll put it out maybe tomorrow or the next day, and let others have a listen to it, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.